On a day when the death toll of the deadly floods wreaking havoc across the country goes up any further. People displaced all across the country, a nation under siege from the rains. This is the kind of evening we have this for you, this day, this wonderful, wonderful Thursday. With me, Victor Muyakane, together with Rhoda Nyamai on sign language. Before we get into what we have in store for you this evening, including an interview with the great governor of the great county of Makueni, here are the highlights. Tonight, President Ruto introduces sweeteners to accompany the Hustler Fund during the commemoration of the fund 1 year later.
Sasa tumekubaliana ya kwamba kila mtu ambaye amesave tutakulipa interest ya 12% kwa pesa yako.
The government states that 16 more people have lost their lives due to floods.
A total of 16 deaths have been reported, raising the death toll to 136.
The total number of fatalities now reaching 136. Controller of Budget says that Turkana and Nairobi counties have the most extravagant expenditures in travel budgets at the expense of development.
Control of these recurrent expenditures such as domestic and foreign travel is very necessary.
With Turkana allocating 1 billion shillings for domestic travel, as Nairobi spent 337 million on foreign travel. Now, the SMS line is 22047. I look forward to hearing from you through that platform. You can also reach us on X, formerly Twitter, at TV47 News, at Muyakane on X, and I'll be happy to sample your feedback. Once again, I'm looking forward to hearing from you. The SMS line is also on your screen. The WhatsApp line is also on your screen. And once again, I look forward to hearing from you this evening. Shall we begin? Now, celebrating the 1 year anniversary since the introduction of the Hustler Fund, President William Ruto declared that Kenyans actively participating in borrowing and saving through the Financial Inclusion Fund can now redeem their savings. Additionally, he disclosed that the borrowing loan limit has been amplified by 50% for individuals who have consistently borrowed and repaid. The adjustment results in an increased amount that groups can actually access, ranging from 200 shillings to 1 million shillings. William Moige provides more details on this.
President William Ruto led the marking of the 1 year anniversary since the launch of the Financial Inclusion Fund, dubbed the Hustlers Fund, which was rolled out last year. President Ruto lauding one of his pet projects as one that has revolutionized the credit industry with an aim of empowering micro, small and medium enterprises. The president and his deputy Rigathi Gachagua taking a swipe at those who are opposed to the introduction of the fund.
Wengine wamepeleka huko kusema watu wengi wamekosa kulipa. Mimi nataka niwaambie the good news. If this product was what they are saying, it wouldn't be sustaining itself as I talk to you today.
Wale ambaye walikuwa hawatutakii mema, walikuwa wanasema hii mahasala wakipewa hii pesa watapotea nayo.
The head of state announcing it was time for persons consistently saving and borrowing through the fund to reap the benefits. The president has declared that among the 2 billion in savings, with 1.2 million Kenyans contributing, those who have saved over 6,000 shillings will receive a Friday reward in the form of a 2-to-1 matching fund for their savings. Additionally, an option allowing individuals to withdraw 30% of their savings has been introduced. However, the president has encouraged Kenyans to refrain from withdrawing their funds by offering a 30% bonus of the total amount as an incentive to keep their savings intact.
Kila Mkenya ambaye uko na savings, ile 30% unaweza kuwithdraw ukaenda ukafanya kazi yako. Lakini ukiacha pale, tutatumia hiyo savings baada ya mwezi moja to double the limit.
Furthermore, on the 31st of December every year, the president has announced a 12% bonus. There have also been a revision to the credit access limits, with 1.2 million Kenyans experiencing a 100% increase in their limits. For those who have borrowed between 5 and 10 times, the increase is set at 60%, while those who have borrowed between 2 to 5 times, the borrowing limit will see a 40% upward revision. Additionally, group borrowing has received a boost with an increased limit ranging from 200,000 to 1 million Kenya shillings.
Na tunataka kila mtu apate nafasi ya kujisimamia kwa sababu tulisema kazi ni kazi.
According to the president, the Hustler Fund is presently catering to 7.5 million repeat customers, having disbursed 39.7 billion shillings among 21.7 million individuals. The total savings within the fund amount to 2 billion shillings. 1 year of the Hustler Fund, President William Ruto promising more goodies to Kenyans who will take advantage of the services being offered by Hustler Fund. Mwege William, TV47, Nairobi.
Thank you, William. Now, small business owners have lauded the move by the president to increase the limit for borrowing of the Hustler Fund by 50%, beg your pardon. Speaking at the celebration of the 1-year anniversary of the Hustler Fund, they said that the funding has enabled them to improve their businesses and therefore contributing to the country's economic growth. They have urged other business owners to use the fund for their benefit, especially with the increased loan limit once someone borrows or saves.
Ile unaendelea tu na kusave, bado hiyo pesa kuna vile itakurudia. Sasa tumeelezewa vizuri na sasa hata mimi nimepata motisha ya kuendelea na kusave kwa sababu ninajua after some time hiyo pesa itanirudia.
Tumeongezewa tena. So ikifika jioni ka limit kako juu tena. Na tunaweza kosa kutoa na saa hii tugoje December 31st. Juu ametuambia ikifika na December 31st tutakuwa tukiongezewa.
Na tumefurahia sana juu ya Hustler Fund, pahali tulianza chini nayo. Kwa saa hii tumeongezewa limit na tunafurahia sana hiyo maneno ya saving. Hivyo amesema tunafurahia juu tutakaa hiyo mwezi moja ndio tuchukue kitu mzuri.
Away from financial matters, and the heavy rains being experienced in most parts of the country continue to wreak havoc, with 13 more deaths being confirmed countrywide in the past 24 hours. And as our reporter Grace Kuriakanja now tells us, the government, led by President William Ruto, will assess the situation in the counties over the weekend, even as a decline in rainfall is anticipated.
136 fatalities. That is the number of lives the heavy rainfall caused by El Niño has claimed in the country. The ad hoc Cabinet Committee on Disaster Response also announced that more than 92,400 households have been affected by floods,
comprising of slightly over 462,000 persons.
Each of these numbers representing a home, an individual, a human being.
The Kutulo-Elwak Road has since been repaired by the Kenya National Highways Authority engineers and is now passable. This has allowed a total of 36 truck convoys carrying various commodities, including food and diesel, that was stuck at Tulo to now reach its destination.
The southern parts of the country are still expected to experience rain, even as an overall decrease is expected. This even as the government continues with its relief food plan,
including airdrops to inaccessible areas. 10 tons of assorted food items have since been airlifted to Wajir this morning.
To assess and understand the situation on the ground better, President William Ruto is expected to lead his cabinet to the counties over the weekend.
Farmers are advised to harvest mature crops and make use of temporary storage facilities in the counties.
Now, the government has provided an emergency call line 02021 51053 that you are free to call any time in case of anything. Now, remember to exercise caution, avoid crossing flooded areas, whether on foot, on a motorcycle, or a vehicle for that matter. Do keep warm. Grace Kuriakanja, TV 47.
Now, good people, I think I noticed I was having a little bit of trouble seeing you people over there. So allow me to just get properly situated and I believe we can continue. Now, the UAE has announced its commitment of $100 million or the early morning hours along the busy Naivasha-Maimahi Road at the Karigita turnoff in Naivasha, a fierce fight erupted as EACC officers arrested traffic police on duty. 2 others managed to escape, but the 3 were arrested. As Paul Kirobi reports, the Director of Public Prosecution, Twalib Mbarak, has urged the Inspector General of Police to disarm traffic officers.
Tuesday morning, and here it was supposed to be like a day like any other. Traffic police officers manning the busy Naivasha highway, however, were in for a rude shock chaotic. The disturbance unfolded as clear videos revealed exchanges between drivers and traffic police officers, hinting at a prevalent culture of corruption along the major highway. Following a tip-off from concerned Kenyan citizens regarding alleged irregularities in the daily operations of traffic police, anti-graft officers initiated an operation to investigate whether the traffic police officers have been involved in collecting bribes from motorists. While in this specific vehicle, officers from the Integrity Center observed the traffic officers who were managing the highway. Deliberately, they chose to stop in front of them with the intention of initiating a conversation. However, it became apparent that the traffic officers were completely unaware of their presence. As the traffic officers attempted to find an escape route, they were promptly arrested. This led to a peace couple unfolding along the highway. While in the Navy, 2 other police officers resisted arrest and escaped into the nearby bushes, aided by one who was firing at the EACC detectives who were pursuing them. During the scuffle and shooting, the 2 fugitive police officers took away some of the money that had been recovered by EACC detectives, amounting to about 15,000 shillings, allegedly collected within an hour. The commission successfully apprehended 3 police officers, namely James Njeru, Dixon Jagi, and James Mwai. All the 3 officers were from Naivasha Police Station. The arrested suspects were escorted to Integrity Center Police Station, where they were processed. They are currently held at Kilimani Police Station. While confirming the incident, EACC CEO Twalib Mbara called upon the Inspector General of Police Japheth Kome to disarm all police officers manning traffic, considering the risk they continue to pose to EACC officers when conducting operations. The action is anticipated.
I'm in communication with the IG. The IG supports EACC. His position is very, very clear that traffic police officers should not carry weapons, should not be armed unless it is extremely necessary for their own safety.
The action is anticipated to spark another debate among high-ranking traffic officers within the police department. Paul Kirobi, TV47.
Now, away from that, the government has underscored its commitment to eradicate HIV and AIDS by the year 2030. Speaking in Meru County ahead of the World AIDS Day celebration, Chief Executive Officer of the National AIDS Control Council, Ruth Marsha, said that Kenya has doubled the number of people on HIV treatment from 2013 and has recorded a significant decrease of new HIV infections. Andreen Kilemi has the details.
The fight against HIV and AIDS intensifies as communities and young people are now brought to the forefront in eradicating the epidemic. This year's World AIDS Day commemoration under the theme "Let Communities Lead" will see communities across the world on the front lines if properly resourced.
Kama ni mafunzo kuhusu ni vipi wanaweza kutumia madawa vizuri, kama ni kufuatilia kuona wanatumia madawa vizuri ili watoto wasipate uambukizo, kama ni kufuatilia watoto kuona kuwa watoto wanatumia madawa vizuri wale wadogo, na pengine pia mafunzo kwa wale ambao hawana virusi. Tungetaka kuwa na ofisi kila mahali, lakini kwa sababu ukosefu wa hela hatuwezi tukafanya hivyo.
Speaking in Meru County ahead of the World AIDS Day celebration Friday, Chief Executive Officer, National AIDS Control Council, Ruth Marsha, underscored the government's commitment to end HIV transmission by the year 2030.
We have also done a lot in terms of reducing new HIV infections. In 2013, we used to have about 100,000, and last year there were about 22,000. And again, the children also transmission rate has gone down.
Despite efforts to prevent and treat the disease, HIV-related stigma and discrimination significantly affects the success to fully address the epidemic.
Although we have treatment, stigma and discrimination continue to stand in the way. And there's no way we are going to treat this disease as just a health issue without bringing communities to break down the structural issues, the gender-based violence that you're seeing, sexual offenses you're seeing against children, and what we are now calling the triple threat, where the HIV is interacting with children through adolescent pregnancies as well as sexual and gender-based violence.
It has, however, emerged that despite the notable reduction of cases of mother-to-child transmission before and during birth, the number of children being infected even after delivery is quite high.
And that is why we want to call out for men to become part of this awareness. If you're a man and you're having unprotected sex when your wife is pregnant or when your wife is breastfeeding, you need to know that you can pass a virus from yourself to the mother and to the child.
As the world gears towards the commemoration of the World AIDS Day tomorrow, calls have been made to end stigma and create awareness about the causes, the risk factors, symptoms, as well as access to medical care to ensure a zero-rate transmission of HIV infections by the year 2030. Andreen Kilemi, TV47, Kinoru Stadium, Meru County.
Now, the government's decision to privatize key parastatals may end up rendering more Kenyans jobless, depending on what terms the new private entities shall venture in with the government. oblivious obviously to the fact that the cost of living is still pressing Kenyans to the core. The National Treasury and Economic Planning Ministry has suggested that selling the Kenyatta National Conference, or rather Kenyatta International Convention Center, that is KICC, the Kenya Pipeline Company, KPC, and the new Kenya Cooperative Creameries, KCC, as some of the parastatals that will be put on the block. Mike Kagongo reports on the implications of the sale of these entities to private sectors.
Just over a month after President William Ruto signed the privatization bill of 2023 into law, the government has selected 11 state corporations for sale. Listed on the privatization program are companies like Kenyatta International Convention Center, KICC, Kenya Literature Bureau, KLB, Kenya Pipeline Company, KPC, and New Kenya Cooperative Creameries Limited, among other entities. According to Advocate Paul Masharia, the underperforming entities shall generate more revenue collection once their shares are owned by the private sector, owing to the fact that the private sector is business-oriented, compared to the government whose aim is service delivery to its people.
The government will now be able to focus on other more relevant and more important service. Because you understand, it is not all the services the government is privatizing. It is just privatizing some of the entities. And those entities are the ones that offer services.
However, this may lead to mass job losses amongst public parastatals upon privatization, occasioned by new terms of reference taken by private entities.
The more the government has control over what is happening, the more spending it is. The more spending it has, the more burden it is to raise more revenue. And the more difficult is it for the government to even subsidize or to even chip in the services that are very vital that it needs to intervene.
President William Ruto has expressed his desire to revitalize the private sector and even mentioned that his government was looking for a buyer for Kenya Airways, which is currently experiencing difficulties. Mike Kagongo, TV 47, Nairobi.
Tonight, county governments are on the spot after the Controller of Budget, Margaret Nyakango, exposed how the devolved units spent 17.4 billion shillings in the financial year 2022-2023, representing 4% of the 47 counties' total expenditure. According to a quarterly report presented by Madam Nyakango to the Finance and Budget Committee of the Senate, the county spent 15.2 billion on domestic travel and 2.2 billion on foreign travel at the expense of development and pending bills. And as Apollo Komau reports, Turkana and Nairobi counties lead in the massive expenditure.
Turkana and Nairobi counties were the biggest spenders in local and foreign travel in the latest quarterly report by the Controller of Budget, Margaret Nyakango, exposing massive wastage on how county officials continue to travel with reckless abandon as Kenyans beg for development amid the high cost of living. Nyakango, who appeared before the Senate Finance and Budget Committee, saying the 47 devolved units spent 17.4 billion shillings on domestic and foreign travel, representing 4% of their total expenditure for the financial year 2022-2023.
This is quite a lot, by the way. It can run very many ministries. Control of these recurrent expenditures, such as domestic and foreign travel, is very necessary. This can be done by curtailing the number of trips and size of delegations, as well as the frequency of travel at the county level.
Out of the 17.4 billion shillings, 15.2 billion shillings was for domestic travel and 2.2 billion shillings for foreign travel. On domestic travel, the report singles out Turkana County as the highest spender in domestic travel, having spent 1 billion shillings, followed by Migori, which spent 894.3 million shillings, Bungoma County 696.2 million shillings, Tana River 532.6 million shillings, and Nairobi County 528.6 million shillings.
Nairobi is leading on wastage of funds on foreign travel. So when I politely request that I am allowed to find out, are you really in control?
We really want to help the counties and also help your office. So we'll invite you with some follow-up issues.
By highlighting these issues to you, today, Honorable Senator, you have confessed that by seeing this, you feel touched.
The report further cites Nairobi as among the 5 highest spenders for foreign travel, with Governor Sakaja spending 337 million shillings, followed by Baringo with 184.3 million shillings, Mombasa 124.8 million shillings, Nakuru 100 million shillings, with Kisii closing the top 5 spenders with 96.9 million shillings. Despite the counties blowing billions on travel budgets, only 7 counties spent 30% of their budgets on development, as required by law. The counties are Marsabit, Baringo, Uasin Gishu, Mandera, Kwale, Kilifi, and West Pokot. According to the report, pending bills have also gone up from 153 billion shillings in 2022 to 164.7 billion shillings by June 2023. Nairobi leads with 107.3 billion shillings, Wajir 5.5 billion shillings, Mombasa 4.2 billion shillings, Kiambu 5.9 billion shillings, and Mandera 3.1 billion shillings. Apul Kamau, TV47.
Family Bank has posted a 3.02 billion shilling profit before tax for the period between July to September of this year, driven by a growth in customer deposits to 108 billion shillings. During the period, total assets have grown by almost 10%. However, loan loss provision has grown 110%, a trend that is growing in the Kenyan banking sector, denoting the effects of the harsh economic times. Here are the details of this and others in our business news roundup.
Banks are increasingly amping up their loan loss provision after an increase in non-performing loans across board as financial sector players amp up their backup funds during a time when Kenyans are defaulting. The release by Family Bank comes just a day after the Kenya Bankers Association gave recommendations to the Monetary Policy Committee before the revision of base rates next week. Elsewhere, the Kenya Electricity Generating Company KenGen's shareholders are set to receive 2 billion shillings in dividend payout, one of the highest the company has paid since 2016 rights issue. This follows approval by the NSE-listed company's shareholders, where the payout comes at a time when the company posted a 5.2 billion shilling in profit after tax.
KenGen has not only met but has exceeded expectations. We continue to be the flag bearer of clean, reliable electric energy.
Finally, Kenyans have been advised to amp up their broadband connectivity through the use of legitimate and certified fiber optic cables. This as statistics reveal that only 9.8 million Kenyans living in urban and semi-urban areas have access to broadband internet.
And even now, as we scale, we are looking at how this connectivity will help us to spur growth by empowering, connecting our people and providing them with the opportunities that are available in the digital space.
Time will tell, but we think that there's a value proposition that we bring onto the table at this point.
This as statistics reveal that only 9.8 million Kenyans living in urban and semi-urban areas have access to broadband internet, more than a third of them having low-speed dial-up internet. Hibak Said for TV47.
Right, that's about all we have in store for you as far as news is concerned. But up next is an interview I conducted a little bit earlier today in Makueni County with the Governor, Mutula Kilonzo Jr. And we're talking about wide-ranging issues, including the recent numbers of people who've lost their lives in that county as well as the rest of the country in regard to matters floods. Here is that interview, and I leave you with that for your viewing pleasure. But in the meantime, I'd like to wish you a good night full of God's blessings.
possibilities.
Good evening. I am in Makueni County. I'm surrounded by hills and picturesque views. And with me tonight is the governor of Makueni, the Honorable Mutula Kilonzo Jr. Karibu sana.
Thank you. Welcome to Makueni.
Thank you so much. Good to have you.
Yeah.
All right.
It's a pleasure.
There's a slogan here of Makueni County. Tell us about that.
Which one?
No, that one next, but the first one,
Andumbe.
Andumbe.
That is in our flag.
Yes.
We people first. We in Makueni have the slogan that I followed from both the previous government and myself. We put the people first.
Put the people first.
In everything we do.
Right.
Yes.
And I would like to come back to the other one that I understand is somewhat biblical.
Yes, yes.
But we'll bookend with that.
Yes.
But still, on the subject of people first, Makueni has been in the news of late, and bearing the brunt of the recent flooding.
Yes.
Care to just orient us as to how things are? What's the state of the situation as of now?
We received a lot of rain in the last 2 weeks. Fortunately or unfortunately, not just rain that is coming from Makueni, partly from Kajiado, and we are fortunate to have, or unfortunate to have, two big rivers. And as a result of flash flooding, half of it is flash flooding. We have lost up to 10 people.
Wow.
10 people, yes. People have drowned. In the case of this, it's more than 10. In the case of the 7 people who drowned last week, you'll be shocked that they actually crossed the river, go to the middle, and decided to pause. And so they were there for a couple of minutes. So in just a short while, because again of flash flood, the water levels increased because they were just patching on top of twigs and logs. So we have lost people to flash floods, and similarly we, other than flash floods, mudslides. We lost a 16-year-old girl last week who had just completed KCZ and did very well. But because of the terrain in part of Makueni, she was hit by a mudslide that got into their home. I have people in 4 camps as we speak who have left their homes because of excess water and flooding. So that has been the situation in Makueni. It's not as bad as I anticipated, but we have people who are in distress and whose homes have been destroyed by the heavy rains.
Okay.
Yes.
Speaking of anticipation, the weatherman pointed out that there's going to be above normal rainfall and so on, and leaders across the country were urged to come up with their own systems of mitigating, the disaster that is sure to follow. What did Makueni identify as problem areas, and what did Makueni do?
We had flagged. We had flagged floods, mudslides, rivers. And as for the rivers, what we did was I got the military through Kenya Red Cross to train our disaster team to rescue people. In fact, 2 days ago, we rescued a man who had perched on top of a rock in a river for more than 6 hours.
Wow.
So using our divers, we managed to rescue somebody. At Sultan Ahmud, we managed to rescue 2 people who were in a vehicle, got stuck in the middle of a fast-flowing river. Same river that carried drowned the 7 women. This man had been in the water for more than 6 hours. Using our experienced drivers, we were able to rescue them, even though the military had already sent a chopper, but we managed to rescue those people in the middle of that river. We had set aside, in fact, camps in various places where anticipated there would be mudslides because of the terrain. We had alerted people. I had formed ward committees. The reason why I get information quickly is because I have ward committees in the 30 wards that are monitoring houses, people, somebody is missing, the communication comes directly. We have set up what I call an operation center outside the Red Cross offices, just outside my office here. We have an op center here that receives the information. We have a coordination team of national government and county government where I co-chair with the county commissioner. We set aside funds, fortunately. We set aside a huge amount of funds for emergency to cater for the people who are being moved and who are living in schools as we speak. We are catering for them. And of course, I've asked donors. As we speak, I'm waiting to see the Makueni Professionals group that has come with the assistance to give to the people who have been affected by the floods. So those, and lastly, we also issued alerts through an SMS platform. But even though we have issued those alerts, we have lost people through dams. We have lost people through attempting to cross rivers, underestimating the flow of water. We lost a pastor who just decided to cross the river. When he got to the middle, he realized he can't go forward, he decided to reverse. He couldn't see where he was reversing to. So he just reversed into the river, the car turned, and a few hours later we collected him a kilometer away. Yeah, very, very unfortunate incidents, but they have happened.
Right. What would you say is the reason these incidents happen in the same pattern? I mean, other counties are facing this, and we're seeing some of these patterns emerging of these deaths being caused by more or less the same issues. Would you say there's an issue with bridges, for example, or safe river crossings in this area that needs to be dealt with?
Yes. If we had planned our roads better, and I'm saying both at national level, because some of the bridges are very expensive to construct. People would cross rivers with irrespective of the weather and the water. So we have, as a country, in terms of our planning, we should have made the cost of doing bridges cheaper. I have, in fact, because of a bridge I saw which is now existing at Thwake Dam, interested the national executive to make sure that once that project is complete, we get that bridge. It's a simple metal bridge. We've just made it expensive for no good earthly reason. Yet these crossings just need very simple bridges. The Chinese who are doing the Thwake Bridge have done a simple metal bridge, simplest technology, and people have managed to cross, because the deaths, as I said, and I understand the anxiety of people who want to go home, anxiety of people who have families. These ladies came from a function of the First Lady of the country in Kasarani, go to that place. The people who had ferried them refused to cross, but they were anxious to go home, and you can understand. And so they got into the river, crossed up to the middle point, waited, and up to now we have not found 4 of them.
Wow.
A week later, 4 have disappeared completely, and we are not even sure whether we'll find them now that the river cuts across and goes to Athi River, which means then you have crocodiles and other things. So we have other vagaries of weather.
Right.
But the same causes that were there during El Nino in 1998 are the same ones that are happening now. And it calls the country to rethink its infrastructure development. And the question must arise. I've seen very simple bridges in Tanzania for people. Forget about motor vehicles. That are the famous hanging bridges.
Right.
The famous hanging bridges that I saw in Kirawira, Tanzania, is also a technology that we can adopt, so that people, irrespective of weather, when it is raining, they can cross safely to the other side.
Right.
So it's just a problem of planning, because these rivers are known. Like one of our rivers is known. It doesn't matter whether Makueni is raining, as long as it's raining in Kajiado, it comes with thrice the force.
Right.
Yeah. So it's something that we must learn.
And still under people first. One of the trends that is emerging across the country is lots of people are complaining that the response is not people friendly. It does not consider the well-being of the people. It's all about just lumping people into camps and so on. What is your government doing to make the humanitarian assistance humane?
First, we requested the schools, because schools have infrastructure. And infrastructure means that you have a classroom. You most likely have a sanitation block, because those are the important. things, and chances are that every school has a place where you can cook. So we have set camps where there's infrastructure, so that when we buy mattresses and we buy blankets, which we have bought, we know that we can safely keep people in a school. And of course, in a school, you would expect that there's an infrastructure, there's a gate, there's a watchman. And of course, the women and the men can have a place where they can, what I call sanitation blocks. So those are the concepts, and that's why we mapped them in advance.
Okay.
I must say that after the Solai Dam tragedy, Senator, now Governor Sakaja, and I prepared what we call a disaster management bill. We're following the International Convention on Disasters and Reduction, what they call disaster reduction, we call it disaster management, that should prepare us for these things, that you have a multi-sectoral team, you have resources flowing, you have a place where these things are kept, so that immediately a disaster happens, people don't suffer the way you're seeing them suffering. Medicine is available, blankets are available, children can be catered for, because in one of the camps I have over 18 children who are below 5 years. And you can imagine the cold weather and everything else is something that is should bother us as a country. That we wait for a disaster, sit in a meeting, a committee is formed, you start planning, cabinet sits again, gets money before money starts flowing. Hundreds and hundreds of people have either suffered, have no food, have no home. I've seen the stories in Northeastern. I mean, it's unbelievable. And trust me, when the water recedes, you're going to have waterborne diseases following.
Right.
So as a country prepared that we are going to have waterborne diseases coming up, have we prepared through the Ministry of Health so that we can start making sure that we treat people for waterborne diseases, mosquitoes will follow, and other things. So I see a country that is always unprepared to deal with any disaster, whether it is locusts, whether it is drought, whether it is floods. Our reactions are the same, which is extremely unfortunate. Because when I got into office, I was planning drought response. Now I'm planning flood response at county level. But now that I know it, fortunately we had budgets in advance. I had mapped out, following the reports by the weather meteorological department people. So we had in mind that we need a first team. I trained divers, and we have managed to save people who have caught themselves in otherwise flooding waters.
Right.
Yeah, but it's impossible as a government to monitor everybody. It's also impossible to criminalize just crossing. Somebody wants to go home. How do you criminalize that action? I've had difficult times, just the dilemma of what to do with when I tell people, please don't cross this river, and they decide to cross. And since I've seen and I've been to these families, you see the burden of a whole village losing 6 women is a disaster beyond belief. Yeah.
A huge part of disaster management is funding. There's recently been some push and pull around funding from the national government to the counties specifically for El Nino. Straight up, have you received any money from the national government?
No money at all. The disaster framework, on the emergency framework under the law, is only 2% of the budget. That's the most you can do for counties. Disaster being a concurrent function, the disaster and emergencies then falls under the contingency fund, which is run through national government. And that's why in a proper running system, the funds that would be available for any disaster ought to be already ring-fenced. A committee existing from county to national. The minute I say we have a crisis in Makueni and it is declared an emergency, then the funds starts flowing. But increasingly you see that the executive has to meet, governors have to go and see the executive. It's just the absence of a proper system and framework. And therefore, then we are now having a discussion or having a tiff between whether money was sent or money was not sent, or money can be appropriated. Under the public finance management, I cannot pick money the way you would pick eggs or you pick tomatoes or potatoes in a market and put in another basket. It doesn't happen. It's a legal process. And when, at the point where an announcement was made that there was no disaster, a lot of people didn't think it was necessary to budget for it as a disaster. But we actually did budget for that disaster. So within the little means that we have managed to at least take care of the people who have been displaced by the floods.
It appears there's something of a breakdown in relationship between the counties and the national government, particularly when a response is needed, a quick response for that matter, in times like this. Where are the gaps in that relationship and what needs to be done? For example, you haven't received the money, you confirm that.
Yeah, we've never seen the money.
Where are these gaps and how would this be done better?
The gaps are how it is operating at national government, because it should be clear which docket disaster management falls. It should be very clear.
And it isn't?
It isn't. Now, in the absence of a docket for devolution, then the devolution docket falls under the deputy president at the executive level. That is also a problem. It's also a problem.
How so?
It's a problem because it's too high level. That discussion is too high level. The frameworks all over the world is a disaster is not something you can deny that it's a disaster. The floods in Northeastern is not something you can deny. You can see it for yourself. It doesn't have to go to that level. It has to fall under a docket, a ministry. The ministry, through counties, have a better collaboration. But increasingly, you can see it becomes as if it's a tussle between national government and county governments, because nobody understands how to handle disaster and emergencies. The disaster in Makueni is not a Makueni disaster. Or an emergency in Makueni is not an Makueni emergency. It's an emergency everywhere. And therefore it must be understood from that framework. Once you understand, and national government following, because they have the tools, they have the people, they are in a better position to mitigate disasters. The thing about disasters is to mitigate before they happen. When it happens, it is called recovery. How did you recover from that disaster? But how do you mitigate disasters? We were aware, and we should have planned in advance. And planning in advance means then we should have had clear guidelines on what to do. A proper functioning country cannot operate the way we do. I've been through several of them out of the work that I did under disaster management and the Solai Dam tragedy in the Senate. I went to Brazil. By the time there was an oil spillage in Brazil, they could see it on screen. By the time there's an accident on a highway, they know who to call, what to do. Those things are important for this country. And the faster we get into that framework, the better for us. So that then handling of a disaster and emergency is not a political issue. I don't have to be a governor in the ruling party. The fact that somebody in Makueni didn't vote for government is not it should not be an issue, should not be a discussion, should be something where the system clicks and acts without necessarily having either to do political gesturing or political posing. Yes.
A lot of this also, the response to the current crisis in the country has highlighted something of a dysfunction in the relationships at the top level at the counties.
Yes.
Particularly, for example, the relationships between governors and their deputies, the relationships between governors and the MCAs and the CECs. We have some counties that have had issues with CEC appointments and so on. Where do you stand on this?
There's no system that has human beings that you don't expect to have problems. So the first thing to do is manage relationships, because it is a skill that is required to handle leaders at all levels, bring them to a level of understanding, and it's not just the ones who are elected, the ones who are in office, even the people out there in the village who are leaders by any form, including the clergy and other opinion leaders. It's a matter of handling those relationships. And the minute you handle relationships and how to resolve disputes, then you don't get into problems. We are not very keen in what I call dispute resolution. We want to fight as opposed to handling disputes. I have done disputes as a profession, and I can anticipate disputes, and I can see disputes coming, and I handle them, so that then everybody wants a stake in the game. Everybody wants a stake in the decision. So the more you attempt to crowd people out of decision making, the more problems you have. The more make it participatory, the better. Everybody just wants what I have heard as famous statement called skin in the game. Where just want a small part in a decision that you made. That's the reason why, in the case of emergencies and disasters, we made sure that we have ward committees out there in the village, because you can't know everything at this level. You can't assume you know what is happening in the village. You must allow people to make decisions, and those decisions are cascaded, and then we make informed choices. So it's a skill, I must say, and it
one that's lacking by the sound of it,
and it requires wisdom, a lot of wisdom to understand. Even if you are a governor or you are an executive at whatever level, even the person at the bottom is also important. So consider them in decision making. Don't use the sort of language that belittles even the person who is elected at whatever level. That's the sort of things that bring disputes.
Do we need sensitivity training for governors and other leaders?
You can see from the cases even in the impeachment of Meru Governor. You can see that it's not a developmental issue. It's a people management issue. Even the calls you see at the national, how do you handle people? How are these people sure of what you are thinking? What is the tone at the top? Those things. Right. I think we have assumed that since everybody has been elected, they will know. It's a bad assumption. We should introduce subjects of leadership, training subjects, because it's leadership.
And you mentioned the recent impeachment proceedings for Governor Mwangaza. You could argue that the entire matter there's a bearing on dispute resolution. There's a proposal to tighten the laws around impeachments. There's an opinion that perhaps it's too easy to take a governor to impeachment and so on. What is your position on that?
We attempted to have an impeachment procedure bill for the 10 years in the Senate. It was rejected by the National Assembly. The idea was to have a higher threshold for impeachment for obvious reasons. That although impeachment is quasi-political, it's both a judicial function and a political function. For stability of governments, we needed a regime of law that would make it impossible just on whims or patriarchal politics or local issues to impeach a governor. That's why the Senate, the words in Article 96 of protecting counties, that is where the Senate comes in. It becomes a firewall, because the Senate is insulated from local politics in regions. And with the number that you require and the threshold that you require to convince 24 senators, that is 24 counties, to pass an impeachment, becomes a threshold that is too high. So similarly, we need to marry the impeachment framework and ensure that the processes are not manipulated or are not subject to other vagaries other than what will be legal. The threshold, believe me, is in the Constitution. Because the threshold of gross violation is gross violation. Gross violation is not violation. The word violation is as a prefix word called gross. So unless it is gross violation, any violation is not an impeachable offense. And we have said that before. But increasingly in Kenya, the impeachments are the ones, some that I saw in the Senate were politically driven, politically muscled through assemblies into the Senate. So as we think of a procedure to tighten impeachment at the levels where you are dealing with both Senate and the assemblies, we've also got to give the judiciary some room, so that a person who is duly elected cannot in one afternoon, because people are in a bad mood or the executive doesn't like that person, is impeached and is out of office and causes instability. The instability you saw in Nairobi is as a result of political interference in what would have been a legal process.
And now in Meru County, there's a petition to actually dissolve the county.
Yeah. Yes, that provision is also there. But it has the petition to dissolve counties has many checks. It has many thresholds. Only that in the case of Meru, it will get stuck. We have no IBC.
Right.
It is going nowhere.
We'll circle back in a second to that particular point. Now, let's take a short break. Pause the conversation. We'll be right back after this.
Let's clear pimples. Step 1. Acne's Creamy Wash is a foamy and gentle cleanser that removes sebum and
Are you playing catch up to other counties?
First, the problems that were in Makueni were both, again, legal and political. Political in the sense that the governor at the time was elected by a minority party. And that it was a political problem, which is not the case. The majority party in Makueni is a party that has elected a governor. So politically, that issue is solved. Legal in the sense that at the time, the demand that was made by the assembly, there was no legal framework for Professor Kibwana to say no. In terms of who determines what figure you should give to the assembly insofar as their expenses and their matters for running the assembly is concerned. Can you at whims decide 900 is too much, I'll give you 700. There was no basis. Believe it or not, the amendment that brought order to not only Makueni, but also to the other assemblies was prepared by yours truly.
Right.
An amendment to the PFM to create what we call a ceiling on recurrent expenditure, both at the executive and at the assembly. So everybody has a ceiling above which you can't go. Yes, and that ceiling is approved by the Commission of Revenue Authority, goes through the Senate, and then comes to the assembly. So you no longer have those issues. The assembly has a resource, which resource is not subject to the governor of the day or the whims of politics in that region. That vote is available for them to conduct oversight without necessarily having the procedure that was there before. That a governor sitting before these amendments could decide that assembly members will not have electricity, they will not pay salaries, will not pay allowances until they comply to wishes of the particular governor. Those things are things that we sorted out by the time we left the Senate.
Right. And so how are things? Are we confident that the governor of Makueni is firmly in control and that everything is okay?
I have no doubts in my mind that our relationship with the assembly has no issues. We are allowing them to do their work in terms of oversight of the executive, and therefore the places where politically you would have issues or logistically, I would be using my position to hamstring them, so to speak, so that they don't have a budget or they're stuck. Those are things that I have known before and I will not participate. I was at the forefront, the first instance, when I was sitting in the Finance Committee, to advocate for the independence of assemblies. Sitting as the chairman of what we call the Senate Legislative Summit, which comprised of both senators and members of the county assembly.
Yeah.
This is the sort of things I used to advocate for. So I'm preaching wine and making wine.
And making wine,
Yes.
and drinking it as well.
Yes.
Now, there's still on matters counties. There's been a lot of debate around spending in the counties, a scrutiny of that spending, checks and balances and so on. Where do you stand on that?
Scrutiny is important because they are public funds. It's only that the counties get a lot of flack, even for the smallest of things, for what is called misuse of funds of a small amount in counties will get headlines as opposed to a bigger amount of money in trillions in the national level. So,
wouldn't someone argue that corruption is corruption?
Yeah, you can argue corruption is corruption, but I'm saying...
Or is this one of those gross misconduct versus misconduct?
Yeah, but I'm saying there will be much more noise when similar offences at counties as opposed to national government. That's not to say that we are not subject to the same principles in terms of scrutiny. Scrutiny is important because it's public funds and the law requires that there's scrutiny. One might argue that the systems that are national government were not in some form cascaded to county level to the extent that running of counties is not as smooth as it is at national government in all fronts. Because any expenditure at county level would require approval at national level. So there is no expenditure that has no signature of approval from the controller of budget at counties. So we welcome the scrutiny that would improve counties. But similarly, the Constitution requires that National Treasury, as big brother, so to speak, would capacitate counties, because what counties are lacking is systems that will ensure that financial regime or financial expenditure is not subject to too much human error. This is a human error. Money placed in wrong accounts, withdrawal of too much money which is not explained. They are all systems. And I pray that we can get to that place. At some point when national government was proposing to have one system for collection of revenue, they ended up abandoning the idea. It would have been ideal. And the IFMIS system that is supposed to approve budgets, upload everything, upload expenditure, is the same system that is used by national government and the honchos at Treasury to make sure that counties are not receiving money. They decide this tap should be closed, and they close it on whims and caprices. So either a unified system to be used by counties. We have suggested that we should have an IFMIS for the 47 counties. Let national government do its work, so that we are not subject to ministries and their expenditure and the sagas at national government. We have an IFMIS dedicated to the 47 entities, which is quick, which is fast, because the people in Makueni would not understand that there's no money at national level when they walk into hospital and they don't find either drugs or services. So it's important. And this conversation must continue, because we must ensure that every coin, because these taxes that Kenyans are painfully paying for, are properly utilized.
Right. Let's shift gears a little bit. The National Dialogue Committee just released a report.
Yes.
Varied reactions to that. What's your own? What are the highlights of that thing?
I'm disappointed, actually, because when you appoint a dialogue committee, the dialogue committee is supposed to be a dialogue committee, and a dialogue committee is supposed to offer solutions. That's why people sit. Others then, why sit to disagree? I mean, why sit to disagree? Why would solutions that would affect every Kenyan become a political issue? Because if you're going to discuss the food prices, it's not a ruling party issue. It's all Kenyans' issue. And so therefore, this dialogue committee, in my own view, let us down. Why? Because if you're appointed as an elder to go and sit in a committee to discuss, they spend more time discussing what they were disagreeing about in public forums and funerals than they did in places where they should have sat down and found solutions. I sat in the 2016 Special Select Committee to ensure that we had a smooth election in 2017. We disagreed thoroughly in the rooms. Thoroughly. We quarreled, we had walkouts. But in the end, we gave Kenyans the laws that would allow them to have an election, would have a commission, and a smooth transmission of results. That is what I expected this committee to do. To the extent that they went to the committee with fixed positions, then they didn't help us. Because the dialogue committee was as a result of people dying. I buried young people here.
Right.
An 18-year-old was buried in Makueni as a result of protests. That should have been a consideration. That there are people who lost their lives because Kenyans were protesting about things that they were unhappy about. Because then when you do not offer them solutions, who is supposed to offer these solutions? So to that extent, the dialogue committee did not give us solutions. You ask the fundamental question. If you're a leader and you can't offer a solution, then who is supposed to do that?
Right.
Yeah.
Are there any elements that are a highlight for you? Something perhaps that is, for example, the development fund, for example. Is that something are there any elements in that report that you actually approve of? For example, the development fund, suggestion and matters of referendum and so on.
See, for example, the audit of the elections. The audit of the elections for me was a no-brainer. Because when we did the election laws, and I drafted with Senator Orengo the ones on the election, on electronic vote, electronic management of our elections, the audit is required by law. So that is not something that they did that is extraordinary. There are fundamental questions, and let me tell you why there are fundamental questions. In 2019, a motion was moved into the Senate to increase the ceiling of borrowing. So we removed what was the criteria for borrowing from a percentage of GDP to absolute numbers. And I said, when my view then at the time was that when you change the framework of borrowing against GDP to absolute numbers, strictly speaking, you are borrowing against nothing. You don't know. The country reached 10 trillion shillings in terms of borrowing even before we went to the election. Yet in 2019, they were saying this framework will take you 7 years. I would expect, and Kenyans must be told, that the problem Kenya has today is because up to around 70 shillings out of every 100 we collect goes to pay debt. And it's the first charge on the consolidated fund. So, what is the solution to it? In 2019, we were told that the increase of the ceiling would allow us to retire some debt or renegotiate debt. Because we were surprised, some debts, we have entered into debt, which some of it is accruing 9% or 7%, and it's a short-term debt. There is no country in the world that is serious about its people that does that. So, if you're going to discuss the economy, you cannot discuss the economy without discussing our borrowing framework. What do? We borrowed as a country. We thought it was a good idea. It does not help us. What do? Because for every, as I've said, the money is not going to reduce, it's going to increase. What do? By the time I left the Senate, we had a fuel levy fund. The fuel levy fund in the law is a fund collected by government out of every person who is fueling that is supposed to cushion fuel prices, fluctuations. What happened to that? Those are the questions I'm asking.
Right.
So that then in the questions of the economy, because we have economists, we have war, there's the war in Israel and there's a war in Ukraine. We can't tell the country that since there's war in Ukraine and there's war in Israel, we'll wait until these people find peace. People have got to leave. So we've got to figure it out. So these are fundamental questions that were politicized. And in the end, you don't have a solution.
Right.
And yet, they're going to, whether it's this government or the person who comes next, whether you want, if you don't answer it now, you still have to answer it later. Because the country has borrowed so much that we have borrowed even for children who have not been born.
Right.
And that is a fundamental question for me, which required a solution.
Right. Now, we've spoken about national matters. We started in Makueni. Let us come back to Makueni. It's a beautiful place.
Yes.
Lots of things are happening in this place, including a very unique festival. Tell us about that.
Yes, we bid for the Culture and Music Festival. Actually, successfully bid for it, to host it in Makueni. And to qualify for such a festival is not a small thing. So it is, for me, a good record that the organizers of the Culture and Music Festival agreed, once they checked the criteria against all other counties that were competing, to host it in Makueni Water. It's a festival that brings so many people to Makueni. They will be here. They will showcase that talent. The people of Makueni will have an opportunity to see for themselves right here. The competition will be on home ground. So it gives me a good feeling that as Governor of Makueni, I was able to bid for this and we have succeeded. I feel good that I'm bringing people to Wote. A lot of people don't know what Wote means. And I told the public, and I thought it was a joke.
Enlighten us.
That the word wote is a Kiswahili word. And I said, interleta watu wote. Wote. Because it comes from Mzungu used to live here, who came here to settle people here. And from the hill, he used to come and ask, watu wote wamefika. So wote gets his name, wote. So it's not a Kamba name, it's
Swahili.
It's Swahili, wote.
And now watu wote wanakuja
music festival.
In Wote.
In Wote.
Right.
So I feel a sense of we are getting there.
Yeah.
But a recognition that you can actually run these things in far-flung. I know what is a far-flung area.
Right.
It's not Nairobi, it's not Mombasa, it's not Machakos. Yeah. So it's far-flung.
Far-flung.
Far-flung, rural areas.
Tumetumia barabara zote kufika Wote. I understand you're very proud of Plug Mtaani.
Yeah.
Tell me, there's a special reason why.
I have really some time for young people, and I have, even when I was senator, I ran a program called Konza Innovation. In the Konza Innovation, I argued with the Konza team that it's okay to build all these nice, fancy looking buildings, but who are the techies that we are going to build? So they said, what do you have, Mutula? I said, why don't you bring young children? And I said, class 8. They said, how are you going to pick? I said, I'm going to pick the top students. Bring them together, do a boot camp, give them tech, give them laptops, tell them what to do, and see what happens. And before COVID, this class 8 students from Makueni, Machakos, Nairobi, were given laptops which they have never seen, computers which they have never touched, and in 2 days, developed applications for weather, for traffic, for whatever you can call it, all sorts of. And the top student was a young man called SIGNET from Dandora. He was actually about younger than even the class 8s.
Mm.
This young man from the slum even got a scholarship to go to South Korea. So why am I proud of Plug Mtaani? Because it follows the same concept. Do you have a good idea that you can market? Put it on video, send it to us. Let's look at something that you can do in whatever sector, and then compete as an incentive. And all these young people were given this opportunity. And when I saw the 30, the one at Tasivia, and they brought 30 so that they could pick 3. Even I said, if I was given the opportunity to judge this 30, I would have problems, because these young people had beautiful innovations. Beautiful innovations. In a 3-minute video, spoke fluently about something that even you can shock you, including keeping crickets.
Wow.
For purposes of livestock feed. A lot of people don't know that is also as a business that you can do, and there are people who are actually keeping crickets for purposes of livestock feed. It's not understood, but when you see the concept, you like the ideas. So why do I like Plug Mtaani? I like Plug Mtaani because it offers that opportunity for the youth. I have asked even the people who are not picked to compete amongst the national top winners, the 27. They should have an opportunity when we have events like this one. Come and showcase, because somebody might be interested in your agriculture innovation or health innovation or beekeeping. Some of it is beekeeping. Very interesting concepts. What we lack, and what I'm happy about Plug Mtaani, is that you offer them an opportunity for young people to use the internet, which is the in thing, to market themselves. Because what are young people lacking? The other day, I was in the innovation exchange that is currently running in Nairobi. And I'm glad that the CEO of the innovation Kenya has now seen the concept that even though we want to have startups, the biggest problem with startups is funding. And if we can market these innovations, you never know. Somebody out there could find a very good idea. If we followed this concept from the person who came up with M-Pesa, then we would have turned a lot of young people to millionaires. It's a fallacy to think that you can offer these people jobs. When I got into Makueni, the Auditor General gives me a flag. I've just gotten in, it tells me you're above the threshold by 10%.
Of employment.
Of employment.
So you have to lay off 10%.
He says, when I got into office, you have overshot the limit by 10%.
So how can
now,
you
what are you
promising job?
What am I supposed to do? There are young people out here who think by me getting elected, they'll get an opportunity to work. But I have already, by just getting into office, I've overshot the limit. So we have to be a little innovative as a country to ensure that the young people who are, and we are blessed. I listen to a lot of people from this region and the continent. We have a potential which we have never tapped of a very youthful and educated population, which we can offer opportunities not only here, but all over the world. I feel very happy when I land in a place like Doha. Everybody who's checking you in is Kenyan. They speak in Swahili. You are welcome and you take pictures.
Right.
It just tells you the potential has not been exploited.
There's more to be done.
There's a lot to be done. And Plug Mtaani is just an avenue of making sure that we can use the internet as a space for young people who are spending a lot of time in the internet, either chatting, videos, whatever, to become very useful.
All right.
Yes.
Governor, we began this interview with a slogan that is very personal to the people of Makueni. People first. But now I'd like to bookend this with another slogan, one that's quite personal to you. It's even biblical. Tell us a little bit about that.
It's Kikamba, you say, Waoni wa kweka nesa no olungalu.
Please say that again.
Waoni wa kweka nesa na olungalu.
What does that mean?
One word. It's coined from the Beatitudes in Matthew 5. It's desire to do good with integrity. Yeah. So if you just bother to get to the Bible and
blessed are they.
Matthew 5. You'll find blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. Now, thirst in Kikamba, if you translate it directly, loosely, is waoni. So blessed are those who thirst for righteousness. So waoni wa kweka nesa. The righteousness is easily translated to integrity.
Oh wow!
Yeah,
and that's your own personal clarion call as well as true north.
That is the true north in terms of the work that we do. So you ask the fundamental question.
Brilliant.
Now that you have done this, where is the thirst for righteousness and with integrity in what you are doing?
Indeed.
Yes.
I hope that the country and the people of Makueni will be able to testify that this slogan will be a key part of your legacy.
Absolutely.
Especially its effective fulfillment.
Yeah.
I thank you so much for your time.
Yes.
I thank you so much for your insight. And let's hope that slogan